Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to begin the next section for today's forum. The theme is From Creative Content to Screen. We know now that there are many different contents and IPs that are converted to TV, films, and drama. And this indeed is a big adventure for these adaptations. If we look at Japan, Korea, Europe, and the US, they have hyped up adaptations with the global OTT platforms. Taiwan must make its move now and translate original Taiwanese content into different formats to enter into the international markets. Now, please help me to welcome the moderator for this session, Ms. Zhai Xiaowei, and also the four panelists, Mr. Wang Shi, Zheng Fenfen, Su Weishi, and Yan Yiwen to the stage.
那也提醒各位语坛人，因为我们现场都已经做好了防疫的工作，我们的
For our moderator and panelists, you can take off your masks when you're on stage. Thank you.
大家午安。
Good afternoon, everyone. I am director of TAICA, Ipa Chu. Let's now go back to the theme of today. The theme of today is From Creative Content to Screen. Let me briefly introduce myself before we begin. I joined TAICA before it was formally established. So I grew along with TAICA. I was a writer. And then after I joined TAICA, I didn't have a lot of experiences converting some of my writing into contents on screens. So today, I'm here really as a learner to learn from our panelists to see how we can convert IPs that exist in written form to content on the screen. In the past, people consume content by watching TV or watching movies in theaters, but now people have multiple devices. They can consume contents from all over the world. So the previous section was talking about OTTs, including international and local OTTs, and how content producers can leverage their strength and to win more markets on these OTTs. Let me make a little advertisement here because I know we have a lot of friends from the industry joining us today. TAICA was established with the aim to put together all of our resources, to consolidate all of our resources so that we can become stronger in the competition. We know that there are a lot of contents here in Taiwan. All of these contents you can find in the publishing, in animation, game, comics, graphic IPs, audiovisual contents, music, fashion design, and art industry. All of these contents are included in TAICA's scope of content promotion. I am one of the people who's responsible for curating this TCCF. When we are looking at TCCF, we want to focus on the discussion of some of the hottest topics in the content industry. So the previous section was about OTT, and here in this section, we want to talk about how to promote investment so that we can convert more IP into content on the screen. So where do all these contents and stories come from? We know that for quality IP, they can create relevance no matter which media that they are put on. So for example, if we analyze the source of audiovisual contents script, you could see that a lot of them come from not only original script, but also literary works or real stories or comics and animations. So when we adapt these written IPs into contents on the screen, how can we make sure that we do a good job in the adaptation so that it can sail to the world of content on the screen while being celebrated by the viewers and the consumers on the different media? So in this section, we want to talk about Taiwan's advantages in converting these smash hit IPs and also the difficulties in converting IPs. So today, we will touch upon the conversion or adaptation from literary works to TV or movies, TV dramas or movies, and also the conversion of comic works into theaters. We have 4 panelists today. The first one is Mr. Wang Shi, General Manager of Activator, Ms. Su Weishi, Chairman of Taiwan Animation and Comic Promoting Association. She has been devoted to the promotion of comics, as well as the adaptation of comics to different media. Ms. Zheng Fenfen, who is a director, and Ms. Yan Yiwen. She has experiences as a screenwriter, as an actress, and also director. She is one of the most important people in making the drama, The Making of an Ordinary Woman. So she is a hotshot right now. For the first round of discussion, we want to focus on Taiwan's strength in adapting IPs. I want to first of all go to Wang Shi. He is a very busy man, but he is here with us because I believe he has a lot to share with us, a lot of observations. So for the first round of discussion, I want to start with Taiwan's experiences in adapting IPs into different formats. So we've been talking about, a quality IP being adapted to different formats. I want to go to Wang Shi first. What do you think about this kind of adaptation? Thank you. I'm Wang Shi. We are now talking about IPs, and I want to actually talk about the more general context first. So let me take a step back. So in a nation where they have very mature markets like Japan, the United States, China, they wouldn't really discuss the adaptation of IP because it's a very natural thing, a daily routine that they do in their content industry. So the very point that we have to discuss about this means that we are still, growing and improving. In the recent years, everybody knows about IP. People are talking about IP. IP means intellectual property. If we look at IP based on, other countries' definition, I think the first thing we need to ask is, what is IP? And is it worth it to adapt IP into different formats so that we can maximize the profit from a piece of IP? In 2019, I read a article that talked about IP. IPs, generally speaking, are literary works or comics. Hello Kitty, it was an IP originating from an illustration, and this illustration was adapted to different formats. Pokemon, the original IP was a game, and then it was converted to different formats. So comics, manga, fictions, these are the largest sources of IPs that can be converted to different formats. So these are light fictions. This kind of works, for example, a manga artist, they can sit in their room, focus on the creation, and they will create a piece of manga. Or a fiction writer, they can produce a piece of fiction. just by sitting alone in the room. But if we want to convert these IPs into, for example, dramas, movies, that will involve a big team and a lot of capitals and a lot of technologies. That cannot be done alone. So when investors think about investing money into the conversion of IP into different formats, of course, they would want to make sure that they can get the return back. So when we are converting IPs into different formats, this means that if this IP itself is quality, it has proven its worth in other areas, we would have a better chance of getting the return back. There is a very important influencer in the field of movie critique here in Taiwan, and he recently wrote an article called Marvel Fatigue. Right now, we know that OTT platforms are, sweeping the market and also consumers' attention. And one of the forces that can compete with it is the Marvel's universe. However, there may be a Marvel's fatigue that's appearing in the movie market now. And if that does happen, it may mean the end of the movie industry. So IP, yes, it's valuable in a sense because it's convenient, it's a proven piece of work that provides more safeguard for investors. However, if we rely too much on IP conversion or adaptation, then we may create consumers' fatigue against these IPs, and the content industry would exhaust itself of more creative capabilities. So DC's, Marvel's, because they are so successful, so a lot of studios are very hesitant about investing in original works. I think Christopher Nolan is probably the only exception, and he has gone into a big fight with Warner Brothers because he really wants to work on original works. So every IP in its most innate and native form is an original work. It is an original work. And when it was an original work, it was carefully designed so that there is a universe may be able to establish that it can be converted and adapted of the original IP. Didn't can be adapted into other formats. Not every this topic today. Yes, it's great to spot quality had this type of IP where it's already very established and that we can adapt it into different formats. I think we need to start from the source. To source it will be possible to find a quality IP. This quality IP probably is not already that popular, but it has great potential to be adapted. So all the IPs, every IP is a piece of original work. Squid Game, for instance. We know that the producer lost 6 teeth in the process of producing the first season of Squid Game. So you know how difficult it is to be engaged in this kind of content production. So we are now talking about IP conversion and adaptation. We now would like to move to Chairman Wei-Shi Su. She has had experiences in this matter in converting a manga to theater work. So let's now turn to her to see her experiences.
主持人也谢谢师兄。
Thank you very much. So Wang Shi is a very difficult act to follow, but I would like to thank him for laying out the groundwork and also the context to talk about a conversion and adaptation of IPs. Now I would like to share with you our experiences in adapting manga work into stage drama. So the work I would like to talk about is Hades Apocalypse. So let me first talk about how we selected the IP. In Taiwan, we have a lot of IPs in the field of manga or fictions, graphic novels, comics. There are also a lot of fan fictions in the field of manga here in Taiwan. So we go to Fancy Frontier Comic Con, which is a Comic Con that I have founded, and there we choose potential fan fictions and comics that can be adapted into stage plays. And the next question I would like to answer is, why did we choose to adapt manga fictions into stage plays? This is because stage plays are very special in many ways. All of these stage plays are unique. Every performance is unique. And also in the world of a stage play, there are a lot of symbolic lines and symbols. The expression can be abstract. So that is why we can recreate in this 3D space the aesthetics of the 2D space in comics and mangas. Also, a stage play, the interpretation and the understanding of a stage play relies heavily on the spectators' understanding and interpretation and the type of relevance that they have achieved or acquired from the play. And this is very similar to reading a manga or comic. The understanding of a piece of comic or manga work relies heavily on the reader's own interpretation and understanding. So stage play itself as a format is already very similar to manga and comic. So it's a very good transition before a piece of manga work can be adapted into for example, a drama or movie. So the work I'm talking about here is Hades Apocalypse. And here in this name, we actually have combined two manga comics together. We want to enrich its content. So we merged the work by Saladin called Hades, and also the work by another writer, The Apocalypse of Darkness of Warfare. So these are some of the pictures from Saladin's original work, Hades. When we debuted this stage play, we actually republished the fiction for the theater version of Hades Apocalypse. So I'm showing you these pictures because later I'm going to play some footage from our stage play so that you can compare the similarities and differences. So you could see that Saladin, the illustrator, the comic author, actually has very strong style. So there are a lot of actions in this comic work. And also, young bows and bells in her work. So, manga and comics is a 2D format. And when it's converted into the 3D world, what would it look like? Let me show you the trailer of the stage play. These are some of the footage from the first half of the tryout that we did in 2018. There were a lot of very Taiwanese characters and elements in it. Of course, there were a lot of revisions done when we formally debuted this work. We used a lot of projections. That was the trailer for marketing this stage play. So in the trailer, you could see that in Hades Apocalypse, there are a lot of very Taiwanese
she has great lines, and then she would come up with ideas and he would come up with the great ideas as to how to change the lines, and then we would allow that to just happen spontaneously. So we would have to go back to the ministry that gave us the funds to make this production and to notify that we had actually changed half of our lines, because we were communicating and listening to the actors and actresses, and we were making modifications along the way. This hasn't been an easy task. In the first season, when we realized that this show has gained such a great momentum in Taiwan, we realized that we are gaining insights into the market. People like to label you as a director of a specific genre, for example. People attempted to label me as a spokesperson for middle-aged women, or someone who makes feminist work, or things along that line. So it felt as if people were beginning to judge me simply by this really successful production that I was able to pull off. They looked at the end product and they said, "Oh, so this is the type of producer that you are." So the label was placed on me, so I really would like to break away from that existing frame. So that sums up my sharing. Thank you for your feedback. Nobody likes labels. Sometimes you're being labeled as somebody who makes grassroots work, somebody who makes avant-garde or feminist work. I would also like to take this opportunity to spread the news that Taitra, in fact, organizes script writing workshops. Please visit our website to find out more about how to sign up for such workshops. And another point I would like to make is that we have an exhibition called The Market. It is a content trading platform where buyers could meet with the content creators and the exhibitions. So how do you attract attention? How do you go from 2D to 3D? We also have a booth in the exhibition at this year's Content Fest. Please make sure you drop by and to check us out. Now, I would like to talk a little bit more about the Hades Apocalypse. The text in the promotional campaign accurately describes the reality of adapting comics into stage plays. This really tells the stories of our journey. It says that it's custom made, it's made from scratch, which is true. There were no predecessors who could tell us how to go about making this happen. We were still making changes to the screenplays, and the screenwriters and the directors were still fighting 1 week before the premiere. So the authors also joined us. The authors didn't really were not really picky about our production. There were some core issues. Still, we need to consult them on. Sometimes we do not have a deep an insight into specific scenes or characters. Then we will have to talk with the authors. I would like to mention that we are adding more shows to our schedule. In 2019, when we first launched this stage play, we were not sure whether it was going to be successful. So the show went on for 3 days. It was like a shooting star. But people describe it as a urban legend that only appeared for a short period of time. Last year, we were going to add more shows, but because of the pandemic, we had to postpone the shows. We had such a great rave review. The Shuiyuan Market Theater, in fact, allowed us to rent the space for a much longer time than they would normally allow other theaters to rent. So for those of you who are interested in investing in us, reaching out, please reach out to us. We are always interested in exploring more partnerships with potential investors. I really appreciate the feedback from the other directors. Originally, this comics was presented in chapters, making it hard to adapt it into our play. So our director said that let us go back to the drawing board. Let us create a new play in terms of the characters, the scenes, and the worldviews. The worldviews are still there. The parallel universe idea is still retained. However, we are changing many elements in there, just like the Marvel universe. You are creating a universe, a parallel universe. You have basically the same setup, the same the same premise. However, the stories are different. So what defines a good IP adaptation? Do you need superstars? Do you need really sensational plot? Or do you stay loyal to the original comics? So we believe that the stage play should involve not just the adaptation of comics, it should also integrate the core elements into itself. So what exactly does that mean? I will give you a little bit more detail here in a minute. Another point I would like to say is that we need to know who our target audience is when adapting the comic into stage play. I think everyone would agree with me that your target audience really determines the direction of your adaptation. Our target audience is the comic fans, not the general public. So what did I mean when I said we need to internalize the comic elements into our stage play? This means the following. I'll show you a short clip. You could hear the audience screaming. Here, the seventh and eighth lords have found their way into a comic author's workshop. This is a scene of boy love. We were giving a new definition to a traditional religion, to the interpretation of deity worship.
日本或是韩国的 idea， 但是只有他愿意画台湾民间信仰。
所以说，这个小家伙他相信我们的。
等一下，你在干嘛？
这个东西是内化进去的。
This is an example of the internalized comic elements.
可以请你帮我一个忙吗？
对，帮忙啊！可是我就是一个漫画家，我能帮你们什么忙呢？
你已经帮了。老师，你人虽变态，但心存善念，
我们大家都知道这个是影射谁？
你坚持的漫画之道，就是这些贤明现代的香火。
好，你画的漫画。
So, the comic is really about a modern interpretation of deity worship. And at the premiere, in the theater, fans even set up a sacrificial altar, like a little shrine, where they make offerings to the deities. And this was actually, and they were lighting incense sticks at the premiere in the theater. This is really about the fans paying homage to the theatrical play. As you could see, the two authors also joined us on stage as actors. Normally, people criticize stage plays because the live-action stage play sometimes failed in terms of converting 2D to 3D characters. However, we were able to retain the original style of the comics, which is a cyberpunk. We retained that style as a general direction. However, we were able to come up with other stage designs to enrich the entire visual effect. So, for the characters going from 2D to 3D, what are the determining factors? I think the factors for success are really to ask yourself, why do the comic readers love this character? As long as you're able to determine that, the audience will be able to connect the dots themselves. When they're able to fill in the blanks for you, they use their own imagination, and they could really identify with the characters on the stage. So when I was saying that you need to be able to strike the chords of people's hearts, the target audience, like I said, is defined as the fans of the comic. So let me show you this short video clip to further illustrate my idea.
全台湾最两位的二创信仰已然到位，眼下天道不平，冤情未返。我陈同学在此拜请四方尊神，助我等返回阴间。
我还不下，回灵感必然不下，混对家必然不。
七人跟八也在旁边念的是。
The seventh and the eighth lords, what are they saying? These are the famous lines taken straight out of the comics. They're acting silly, acting very juvenile, but this is also the characteristics of the original characters. The seventh and eighth lords, the way that they perform these rituals have a lot to do with folk religious beliefs. We, in fact, contacted the Taoist Association so that they can teach us the gestures and rituals and the hand gestures of the two lords. So we, in fact, made our way to view the religious pilgrimage of the Yuhuang Temple. We were able to draw inspiration from the pilgrimage. There were fireworks going off at all time, ghost money burning. So we were able to recreate a scene in the religious pilgrimage. There are paper confettis, and the Chen Huang goddess, when she enters the center stage, we were able to enrich the scene by using paper confettis that mimic the religious pilgrimage. And while this is happening, we have live projection that mimic the visual effect of firecrackers going off. So the director wanted to recreate the visual representation of the ghost money being burned and the firecrackers going off on stage. As you can see, we have projections, live real-time projections that mimic the visual effect of the sparks of the firecrackers.
好，那我们在这场戏
We also used multimedia technologies to enrich this stage effect. We were going to use VR, motion capture technologies, but we had to abandon that idea because there was just too much uncertainties. Later, we added image projection to create a special atmosphere, and this is how we used the image projection at the beginning of the show, welcoming the audience to the underworld.
将您的手机彻底关机，并将所有会发出震动、声响的仪器完全关闭。为防干扰系统，请勿饮食、饮水、嚼食口香糖、吸烟，并不得将饮料及食物带入阴间，可交由服务人员寄放至人间。
好，这个是最后。
Toward the end of the show, in order to tie up all the loose ends, we used image projection to show the gate to the underworld that is opening.
杨德廷，陶歉，提高。
所以其实我们也是用了像。
In fact, we used a lot of elements we think that the younger generations would like. So please allow me to advertise our new shows. In April next year, we will be putting on more shows at the Shuiyuan Theater. We hope that you guys could join us.
Thank you, Ms. Su. So now I would like to turn to Wang Shi. So Wang Shi will also talk to us about the challenges of adapting IPs into visual works. So you have worked on Detention, and also you have a new work called Yan Tie Hua. So Yan Tie Hua is a comic work coming from Taika's CCC Comic Creatives. So why did I want to convert Yan Tie Hua into a visual work? Because this comic work has been published by Locus and it is very popular. This work, Yan Tie Hua, when it was about to be published by Locus Publishing, they contacted me to see if there's potential for adaptation. I was very impressed with this work. This is a local Taiwanese work. And I was very impressed with it. At that time, I was a reader. I enjoyed the reading process throughout. And I know that for Taiwan, it's very difficult for us to find enough of funding to convert this work. So the universe of this work is a little bit like Black Widow. But it has a lot of Oriental elements of Taiwan, and I didn't know if I had this opportunity or this ability to adapt it. However, a few days later, a director contacted me and said he wants to do this Yan Tie Hua, and its adaptation. I am not an expert in movie production, so. What I do is that I help people who want to convert and adapt these works. And this director who has contacted me, of course, is extremely talented. So because of the director's interest, so I was able to talk to Chang Shen, the author of Yan Tie Hua, to adapt it. I was very lucky to obtain the licensing from Chang Shen, the author, and we are now still in the process of adapting it. We are still at the very beginning. So we are about to propose the first phase of the project. We are now writing an outline for this work, and we hope that in next July we are going to make a 3-minute try out for it so that we can have some, visual materials that we can use to talk to potential investors. So we want to, of course, break down the process of the adaptation. We don't just want to go straight to the feature, but start with some short teaser or trailer. Detention was very successful. The adaptation was very successful. It was a successful adaptation of IP. In Detention, and Yantiehua is very different because it has many different elements, horror and comedy and everything. Of course, we also need to look at what consumers may need or like. We received the help of Taika and made a sample, and the post-op was the post-production was also very professional. We were able to upload it online, and we received a lot of investors' requests. What is this about? And a lot of investors are very interested. So I know that we are still, taking baby steps in adapting IPs into visual works, and we need a lot of assistance from our government because they can help us to produce the prototype that's needed to attract investors. And I think the challenge of converting Yantiehua is really more daunting than the adaptation of Detention. So next year, that sample was going to be very important. How do we cast? And the actress playing Yantiehua in the teaser is going to be the same person as the feature. This is a story about Peking opera. Who can we cast to play this role? How do we make this sample, this teaser, so powerful that the investors are fully impressed and believe that we have the ability to adapt such a complicated work into a feature. So the success of that short sample next year will be critical in deciding whether or not we can move on to the feature. Li Qinghao is going to be the director. We need to talk to him to see how we can cast appropriately. What special effect companies are we going to work with? Costumes, art director. All of these are all very big topics, and we are in the process of doing it. And we want to do something that's groundbreaking in Taiwan's IP adaptation. Thank you, Wang Shi, for your experiences. And I think there's one key message there, and that is, how Taika can help our industry, who is still at the very beginning taking these baby steps to get the resources you need to feel that you have, abundant, ample resources you need to do what you want. And I think in this year's TCCF, we see a lot of buyers. And we know that there are a lot of pre-sales that are being done in TCCF. This is extremely helpful because if you can do pre-sale, that means you have enough of production resources and budget. So this is something we want to promote. We only have 10 minutes left. On Slido, we do have some questions. Most of the questions has to do with difficulties. So can we ask our four panelists to talk a little bit about difficulties and challenges you run into in adapting IP? And there is one question specifically for Chairman Su. How do you communicate with different parties during the adaptation process? So as we ask about difficulties, I would also like to use my privilege as a moderator to throw in one more question, and this is when you can, lodge your catchphrase or takeaway message. That is, what's your expectation to IP adaptation in Taiwan in the future? So maybe let's start with Wang Shi. Difficulties. So I think we don't have a very solid foundation now in IP adaptation. So in the process, we need to be creative. We need to be imaginative in order to overcome these lack of skill sets. Let me talk about Detention. So I was involved in Detention early because in spring 2017, when it was launched, the game was launched, I realized that it was really good, and I realized that it could be the first, game adapted feature here in Taiwan. So I very quickly contacted Red Candle, the game publisher, and I also made a pitch to my boss, and we discussed with the game company for about 3 times, and we got the license, and we decided to start the adaptation process. Detention was already a very narrative game, and it has a very complete universe and worldview in that game. But features and games are very different after all. So how do we, trim some of these very local Taiwanese cultural elements? How can we highlight maybe some of the characteristics of the characters to make it pop on the screen? What are some of the checkpoints where, the gaming company needs to come in to check if, we stay true to their originals. So we're not abusing this content. So this is the basic respect you have to pay to the original work authors. And we have to do a lot of communications when we want to do some adaptations and revisions. And we took our time. We didn't want to rush it to the market. We obtained the license in 2017, and we only screened the movie 2 years later. So we took our time to do the adaptation. There were a lot of difficulties in the process. First of all, it was sort of like a horror genre. And in Taiwan, there was a ceiling in the horror genre in box office. It's about 100 million NT dollars. But at that time, we realized that we had to do 90 million in the cost and in the production budget. So it was a very little chance for us to profit. And also, there was a high failure rate in IP adaptation in Taiwan at that time. At that time, we were very lucky where we eventually achieved tremendous success with the feature. When you adapt from an IP, you would think that you are sustaining fewer risks. But at the same time, there are some other risks that may come along. And I think everybody in this industry is addicted to this kind of risk-taking. Thank you. Let me answer 2 questions, difficulties and communication. We used to work a lot in the field of manga and comics. We know little about stage play. So when we were adapting this work, we had 2 producers. One producer was responsible for everything related to the stage play. When do we need to do what? What are some of the taboos of the stage play, circles? What are some of the things that can be done in comics but not in stage plays? So we have a producer who specializes in stage plays as a producer. The other producer was a colleague from my company. This producer was responsible for talking to scriptwriters, directors, and the original authors. So this producer focuses on the content. So we use 2 producers to try to deal with all the communications. If we don't have that content producer, this is Rongpei. I don't know if you're online watching the live streaming. If we don't have Rongpei, being as the bridge between all the different parties and really, make sure that all of the content creators in the process reach a consensus, it would be impossible for us to have Hades Apocalypse. And this is really extremely difficult in a stage play because all of the actors and content creators have their own ideas, and we need a lot of coordination in the process. And in terms of communication, my take is that you have to find people that you can trust in, and you have to have full trust and confidence in them. So, for example, now that I'm seeing, all of these materials in the process, it was still impossible for me to imagine how this work will look like on the stage. It was impossible for me to imagine it. But I fully trusted my producers and my team. When I saw the tryout, I almost, shed tears because I knew I had all the details. But still, I couldn't imagine how it would come up. But I had people that I can trust in. So you have to find people that you can trust in the team. If there is any concern, any issue, you have to resolve these issues. If you cannot do this, if you are not willing to trust people, then you cannot invest in the culture creative industry. Because, in the cultural creative industry, one day you can create a big hit, but the next day you may create something that nobody wants. This is what happens in this industry. So trust in people, trust in the people you hire, and give them full trust and full confidence. That's how you can succeed in this field. Ms. Zheng Fenfen, please. Difficulties, I think. Right now in Taiwan, we still need to improve on our ability in storytelling. So producers, investors, content creators, when we decide to work on a project, be it an original project or IP adaptation, we have to take a step back and also to look at not only Taiwanese market, but the global market. Now that with so many OTTs, we need to compete with international contents. So the ability to tell stories, we have to compare that against the storytelling ability of other countries. IP is not a panacea. We can take it as a fertilizer. You can gain some valuable, nutrition from these IPs, and they can help nurture our industry or nurture our project. And the successful adaptation of IP can become the catalyst for more successes in this area. So I think that would be a healthier mindset.
From my personal perspective, from the original work to the mini TV series of The Making of an Ordinary Woman, we went through season 1 and season 2. I was the producer, I was the director. So as far as the Taiwanese market is concerned, we would need a better division of labor. For example, Mr. Wang will be there to help out. I would tell him, this is what I want to achieve, make it happen. I spend a lot of time creating contents I wish I could. However, I spend even more time taking care of these peripheral tasks. They are very exhausting and overwhelming because I spend so much time dealing with things that are not really directly related to content creation. For instance, when we hand the script to the investors to ask for funding, you would need different versions. If you ask me to write an outline, I could do it. However, when you ask me to write a pitch proposal, the mission, the market orientation, I had no idea how to answer those questions, how to write this pitch proposal. A lot of people say that the more local you are, the more international you might become. For me, I don't know about that. Today I am opening up a local eatery. I will have to have confidence in my dishes in order to open the door and welcome customers. You have to love your own cooking first before you can entertain guests. So I believe that's where I'm coming from. You have to love the story and the content before you can hand it over to a very capable team. I think what you just mentioned can be quite interesting for the creator, for the content creator. If you can run the show yourself, it's very exhausting. It's overwhelming, but it is a very memorable experience. Sometimes we see a lot of great stories. However, the creators are not really familiar with how things are adapted, how to express their own ideas to the audience in different genres, using different formats. Sometimes you're focused on one issue, but having a topic is not enough. For example, when I see a project proposal, for example, your project proposal, I thought it was very brilliantly done. There were multiple characters in the story. I honestly believe you did a great job. Thank you, Mr. Wang. Regrettably, we have used up our agreed upon time. We apologize that we're not able to answer questions that have been submitted to us through Slido. In the interest of time, we'll have to wrap it up now. Thank you for joining the panel discussion. Thank you. With that, we conclude the panel discussion. We will now take a few group photos.